Bonjour, and welcome to what I am calling Cheddx. I believe this may be the first ever TED tasting, and I hope it won't be the last. My name is Tenaya, and as my introducer mentioned, I teach here. I'm an English professor by day, and I'm a secret cheese blogger by night. If I get a clicker, thank you. Tell you a little bit more. I also have 260 cubes of really amazing British Farmhouse Cheddar to serve you about 2/3 of the way through this. So just know that there are going to be some cheese handlers coming through the crowd here in a little bit and serving you what I feel like is almost going to be a baptism. After all, we're in this beautiful church now turned into campus commons. So, Cheddx, cheese and social media. How did I get myself into this? It's a really good question. 3 years ago, I decided to launch a blog called Madame Fromage. And I did this because I read something that made me curious. I read that there were more people becoming cheesemakers in the United States at this time than ever before. People were actually becoming cheesemakers. I believe that some of you may actually become cheesemakers. I found this fascinating. I also read that Americans were consuming twice as much cheese now as they had in the 1970s. So you can imagine my conclusion. I thought, oh my gosh, there's a cheese renaissance underway. Someone needs to chronicle it. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm a Wisconsin transplant. And so I decided I would begin examining or eating my way through as many small-time cheeses made by cheesemakers as possible. So living in Philadelphia, you probably all recognize this. This is the cheesesteak. And I point this out because I think that for most Americans, this is our idea of American cheese, right? It's orange, and it might even come out of a bottle. Just to give you a little context, keep in mind that cheesemaking is a centuries and centuries old tradition. It was actually invented by shepherds who needed a way to get their milk down from the mountains, where they raised their animals, to the villages without the milk souring. So one of them figured out that if you took milk and you heated it over a little campfire, and then you took the solids and you pressed the solids together into a cake, and then you took this cake or wheel and you put it in a cave for safekeeping and to keep flies away, well, that you developed this pretty tasty snack. So as Americans, we have taken the tasty snack and we have shrink wrapped it. We have pressed it between cellophane wrappers to make singles. We have put it into squeeze bottles. And so I wanted to go below the surface of yellow cheese or consumer cheese that comes in block form at the grocery store. So I began asking at cheese counters, how can I find out more about small-time cheesemakers or all these people who are becoming cheesemakers, not just in the U.S. but internationally? And they told me, you must meet Mary Quick. I'm sorry, this is my first PowerPoint ever. They told me I needed to meet Mary Quick. That's Mary Quick right there. She lives in Devon, England, and she's one of the few people that makes traditional cheddar the way shepherds might have made cheddar. There are only maybe a handful of people that still make old world cheddar, and she's one of them. She lives on a farm in southern England that's been in her family for 450 years. She milks her own cows, she bakes the cheese herself, and she ages it in a cave. She's also wild on Twitter, Facebook, and she has a blog. Her blog is called Mary's Diary, and once a month she updates for her readers exactly what's going on her farm. So what's growing in the fields, how many little calves she has in the barn, and what's happening in the cheese cave. So I went in search of it. I wanted to eat some Quick's cheddar. And right under my nose here in Philadelphia, at a little shop called Wedge and Fig in Old City, I found it in the cheese case. Quick's Farmhouse Cheddar, $17.95 a pound. It's probably a lot more than you pay for grocery store cheddar, but there's actually a lot more involved as well. This same cafe was featuring Mary's cheddar in a sandwich called the Expat. And you can see there's some cheddar on there along with a little Marmite and some watercress. It's kind of a little British take on the panini. And so I ate this sandwich, and then I took a picture of it with my phone, and then I tweeted it to Mary, who I had met at a cheese conference. And she said, "Oh, wow, amazing. May I use that in my diary?" And so it was sort of this amazing moment for me where I was at the table eating a piece of cheese, and I was able to access the person who had produced it. So we talk about the farm-to-table movement in the food world, but this was really a table-to-farm moment for me. So Mary and I became friends. These are her cows. That's probably Mary's shadow there in the foreground. She has about 500 cows, and here you can see them grazing on these lush pastures. Now, if you've read anything about the dairy industry in the United States, or you've watched 60 Minutes or read Michael Pollan, you've probably heard these horrible stories about feedlots and cows that are being kind of force-fed corn when really their stomachs are developed to eat grass. Well, one of the awesome things about Mary is that she grass feeds her cows. She really cares about her animals. She's a great steward of the land, and I think you can taste it in her cheese. Here you can see her aging cave. This style of cheddar, British cheddar, is aged in these drums that are called truckles. She wraps them in cloth, like cheesecloth, smears them with lard, and lets them sit about 18 months in the cave. Now, this sounds a little creepy, but it's really what the Egyptians did with bodies when they wanted to preserve mummies, right? So this is a way of preserving the cheese. And the style of this cheese is called cloth-bound cheddar. So I'm going to give you a taste of this and walk you through tasting of some traditional British farmhouse cheddar. I need my cheese handlers to remove the veil from the 5 trays at the sides of the room and to begin to administer this potion. All right. Now, I've just told you a story about Mary Quick, but she is one of hundreds upon hundreds of small-time cheesemakers who are really reviving this industry. When you go to the grocery store, you see a lot of commodity cheeses, as they're referred to. But if you go to your farmers markets, your local cheese counters, and ask for a local cheese, they probably will have them, okay? And I'm going to ask that you take this cheese and you hang on to it for a second so we can all enjoy it together. I'm going to walk you through the process of eating a piece of cheese the way a cheese judge would. There are, in fact, cheese judgings all over the world. I just got back from one where we had over 1,700 kinds of small batch cheeses. Many of these cheeses, never make it to cold cases for national distribution. They are made in such small quantities so that people can really keep the quality up, that they're pretty rare. I also want to say 2 things about social media. One is the only reason I developed this project was because I was curious. I never imagined 3 years ago that I would be writing a column for a local magazine on local cheese, or that I would be a guest blogger for DeBruna Brothers, the largest cheese counter here in Philly, or that I would start a book. I'm doing a cheese book that's going to be out in spring of 2013. I'm doing these things because I started this online project without looking for financial reward. People always want to know, how do you make money off your blog? I don't care about making money off the blog. I'm doing it to find out about something that I love, to meet other people who want to talk about it, to connect to a community of people who support this kind of thing, not to try and get rich, right? But a lot of other cool things have come my way because of it. So I urge you, be curious. I believe if you're curious, curiosity turns to passion, passion turns to profession. The second thing I want to mention is that someone like Mary Quick doesn't have money to pay for a huge marketing budget or social media strategist. She tweets from her barn, right? She can Facebook from a hayloft or from the milking or the place where she's making cheese, her cheese room. I wouldn't have found her story if I hadn't dug pretty deep. So I urge you, don't just be curious, but also dig. Dig for the stories that are worth spreading. All right, are you ready? Yes, there are some really hungry eaters up here in the front row. Okay, So the first thing I want you to do is take a big sniff of this cheese, because 70% of what you taste actually comes through your nose. And then when you put this cheese on your tongue, I want you to let it melt. And if you enjoy it slowly, you're going to notice that the taste sort of changes. And that's what cheese is judged on, its complexity. So you might notice it's a little bit sweet and milky on the front end, and that then it turns sharp. Maybe there's even a little bit of barnyardiness, especially if you got a piece near the rind where it gets also kind of cavey. These terms, barnyardy and cavey, are actual cheese terms, and they're seen as a good thing. So rock on barnyardy and rock on cavey. All right. If you enjoyed this, if you want to let Mary Quick know that you ate a piece of her cheddar here in Philadelphia, at Mary Quick, Quick with an E, on Twitter. She's probably asleep right now in England, but I'm sure she'd love to hear from you. So thanks for having me. Thanks for trying some cheese. Cheers.